funny, we had like, it says like 200 people will be in tonight. You're like, that's never true, is it? That never happens. And it's fine. I wonder why people put themselves down as going if they're not going to go. I find that quite interesting. Right, so I'm going to make sure everyone's muted for a start. There we go. Honey, good morning. Is it morning? Definitely not morning here. Definitely not morning here. It's very dark. I find it interesting when I started recording these, it was all very light and bright, and now it's all really, really, really dark. Thanks, Cosmic. See you Sunday. Will do. It's a more reasonable time for me than you, I think. You get there about 9, I'll be there about 12. I'm too old and I'm very tired. Right, we'll just see who else comes in and then we'll start in about a minute. Can I just remind everybody, please, who is here, that we do just have to respect each other. That's really important to me. Be kind to each other. Good afternoon from New Jersey, USA. Gosh, that's so nice. Thank you for coming. That's really sweet. Please don't comment on anybody. Please don't comment on anybody's appearance, who they look like, what they look like, or whether they've got a beautiful smile. That's not what we're here for. It's not a pickup joint. Please make sure you're wearing clothes. Clearly, if anybody masturbates or anything, if you notice, just let me know, because Jerry isn't here till a bit later, so I'll just get rid of that person. I'm sure it's really thrilling, but hey. My cat, who is always better, says she's just having tea. She's a star of the show, isn't she? Oh, and Master Jim, I noticed you referenced a writing of mine earlier, and I'm not in that group, so I just wanted to say thank you very much for that reference. That was very sweet of me. And I'm sorry that you had to share it, and I hope that things are okay. Cinder says, I expect my kitty will be here at some point too, Bella. I've locked my 3 dogs and my cats out. You're all much nicer than I am. Well, they start barking and shit, don't they? And then it goes on the order. It's just a massive pain. It's crazy. So no, not letting them in. You're really welcome, Master Jim. Thank you. Smokers Galaxy, good evening from London, UK. First time here. Really welcome, Smokers Galaxy. I hope you enjoy it. The rules are quite simple. Be respectful. I don't let anyone chat or do anything. Occasionally we get crashed by some crazy people, and I try to kick them out. If you are a therapist and you want to get some kind of CPD, just notice actually I owe somebody a CPD certificate here as well, because I'm shit at them, I tell you. I'm so bad. You have to get on my back about them. You do. Please be respectful to everybody else in the room. If you write down the side, which you are welcome to do, you're welcome to ask questions. You're not welcomed to put a video on if you're going to wank, be naked, or anything else as well. This is very much a respectful space. It isn't therapy. You are responsible for yourself. It is a workshop. And today we're going to be talking about socialization, about women on women. And I am using men and women. I really, really understand that we are all different. This is what the research is on. And we're talking about when somebody's brought up as a woman and somebody is brought up as a man, or a girl and a boy. We're going to be talking about those influences, because we're going to be talking about things like instinct, we're going to be talking about things like nature, what all of those things mean, and why are women so fucking horrible to other women. That's one thing we're going to be covering. But I also want to cover a little bit of conditioning, maternal instinct, the kink paradox, lying, a few of those things, and then we can see how that relates to kink, especially if we've got submissive women who tend to fall into that category, and actually how dangerous that can be. And that's related a little bit to one of my clients a couple of weeks ago, if you follow me at all on FetLife, who was stealthed. So it's kind of related. It's really related, actually, in so many ways. And then in 2 weeks' time, I'm doing a workshop, and I'm going to do the holidays. It doesn't have to be Christmas. It can be any form of holiday. We're going to talk about how you survive the holidays, what they mean, the pressures that we're under, how to survive and manage toxicity in your family or in friends or different people, and how to look after yourself and maybe even say no and not fucking go somewhere that's shitty. You know, that's another option as well, but all of us don't feel it that way. We really do struggle with that. So as I'm going, you are welcome to ask a question down the side. I try and answer all of them as much as I can. Hello, Queenie. Quite nice to see you. And Jazz says, evening, everyone. Oyster says, hi, everyone. Michelle says, hello, good afternoon from Florida. Have you got nice weather? I might be a bit jealous if you have. I just had a load of cheerleaders staying at my house, and like, you're so bright and sunny and so positive and so amazing all the time. And I'm sure it's all that fucking sunshine. England is so grey, isn't it? At times, like, it was a beautiful day today, and I went for a brunch with a daughter and my sister and my daughter's partner, and it's just a beautiful day. It makes such a difference. I'm not surprised that a lot of people in the UK really do suffer from seasonal affective disorder. It is so grey most of the time. I could have used the holiday discussion in October since we just got done with the festive season in India. Sorry, I guess I use it relatively because, you know, we talk about Christmas and Hanukkah, I guess, more. So I'm really aware that that's maybe unfair. It is a talk I do every year. So I will, you know, once it's recorded, you can have a look for the next time, because there are so many different holidays. There are so many times that we go home as well and meet our family, and we feel quite obliged to be with family. Sometimes we're going to cover that. Mr. P says, lovely to be back, Debs, and good to see you all. Oh, lovely to see you too, and thank you. So why do we want to talk about women on women? Why do I want to talk about women on women, and why has this subject been asked for? And it's been asked for before, and it's like, do I do this as a workshop? I used to run this as a workshop quite a few years ago when I worked in London, and I worked at an eating disorders clinic. I was the clinical supervisor and training director of an eating disorders clinic, and it just always amazed me how cruel women are to women, and it still amazes me now. I remember, so like, I'm probably about a size 18 in UK terms, which is a 14 in American terms. I'm definitely overweight. I've just lost 22 pounds, and I've done a lot of research around eating and different things, and how we're treated very differently. And a little while back, I asked people for their stories. What do you think? What do you think about, you know, how people are accepted around their weight and different things on the scene? Because we put ourselves forward as human beings who are very much, we accept everybody and everything. And I didn't expect to get the amount of messages I got. It's like a full-blown piece of bloody research. I had I think it was like 146 messages in total with people's experiences. So to do that justice, I haven't written it yet, because often I tend to knock something up quite quickly. So, you know, I'm very much writing this one with a lot more care and attention for the people that have written, and I'm not treating it like a full-blown piece of research, but even to look at the findings, it's just really disappointing. It's just I feel disappointment in others. And it made me think of a time I was in the playground picking up a daughter, and I'd lost a lot of weight, and I was pretty tiny at that time. I was probably about size 10, which is a 6 US, like pretty small. And I was standing next to a friend who's always been tiny, and she rolled her eyes at somebody wearing some real Daisy Duke shorts, like, you know, her bottom was completely hanging out. Now, do I think our bottoms can hang out when we're picking up 5-year-olds? I don't know. I'm not sure how much flesh should be. I'm not even going to judge that, you know, like, and her body, they were very high. They were like a G-string, these shorts. So I don't know if I can be a bit prudish sometimes. I totally admit that I'm prudish. I think there are times and spaces for flesh, and there are times and spaces for sex, and in public and all sorts of stuff as well. I'm not sure a primary school is one of them. This person by the side of me went, oh, I can't believe she's wearing those. And I knew immediately she wasn't having a go about this woman having her bottom out. She was having a go because this woman was a large woman with her bottom out. You know, when you just know, it just felt really different. And I looked at her and I said, fucking hell, why would you comment and say that? Why would that come out of your mouth? And she said, what have you got? I said, what? Do you know what? I really don't think you'd have said that to me 6 months ago when I was the same size. And I don't think you've got a right to comment on another woman's body. It's bad enough that we all comment and say horrible things all the time. Why would you join in? And she said, well, it's just inappropriate. I went, if she had a size 10 bottom, would it be as inappropriate? And because I called her on it, what I like about this human being, because I do like this human being, or I did like that human being at that time, well, she said, you know what, you're right. You're absolutely right. All my internal prejudices, and I said, it's just hideous. It's hideous that we do it. And then my second eldest daughter got a phone call from her mum yesterday, or her partner did, Andy from the gym, and Brian had thrown her phone mucking about in the gym, like she was working with a group of quite young kids, mainly girls, and went, right, that's it. this has been a terrible, terrible practice today. This is ridiculous. And she threw her phone on the floor and she went, I'm so annoyed. And she was smiling and clearly joking and engaging with these human beings. And what was interesting is all the girls laughed and went, oh, you're so cross. But one of the little girls didn't. And then her mum phoned and said, it's a safeguarding issue. Breen threw her phone at her. She threw it directly at her. And Andy had been there, who's Breen's partner. They're both equal gym owners. And the woman said, you need to control your girlfriend. Well, that's interesting, isn't it, for a start? What the fuck does that mean? Equal owners of a business. And Andy said, you're taking this completely out of context, and please don't use words like safeguarding when you actually mean you didn't like the way she responded to something and the way she behaved, and your daughter took it very sensitively, which I totally get that some kids do. What was interesting is in the same practice, Andy had a bottle of water, and he was bopping the girls on the head. They like this. If they don't get bopped, they come up and say, I didn't get bopped, hit me. And the mum didn't mind about that one. And I'm curious, is that because Andy's more charismatic? Is it because he's a man? Is it because Breen is a very young woman and also very attractive and very slim? Like, what prejudices come in around our feelings and thoughts around what happened there? Because, one of the little girls did come up saying, Andy, I didn't get hit with a bottle. So, oh, okay, sorry. And then off you go. Whereas Breen threw her phone nowhere near any children and nowhere this particular child and said, that's it, let's do better. And once she got called out for safeguarding. Is that a difference about women? Why do we have a go at women? And she also said, when the mum, when she phoned, she said, this is a safeguarding issue and I want you to be a business owner and not defend your girlfriend. She really, it was so, but then she said, yes, but she still wants to come to the gym and she still wants to come and do tumbling and practice. And Andy said, if you genuinely believe that Breen is a safeguarding issue, I suggest you never bring your daughter here again because your daughter is at risk. Which one is it? And Andy had to deal with it. And is that because he's a man? Is that because he's older? Is that what is that about? And it's interesting because as women, we do tend to tear women down. Why do we? There's lots of research about this, and it's really interesting to read as to why women tear women down and what we tend to do around this. I don't know what you all think. Is your experience that you get torn down often by women or different things? At this eating disorders clinic in London, I was running a workshop for all the new trainees that were coming in. And one of them said, wow, I don't know how these women get up these stairs. And I said, I'm sorry, the trainee therapist. And she said, well, how do you get up the stairs? How do they get up the stairs? She used the word they more than once. I said, who are they? She said, well, fat women. You're on the third floor. This is ridiculous. And I said, I think you need to go to a bit more therapy before you come to work here. I'm already feeling quite angry with you. I don't think you're ready to work with different people of different sizes or people with different eating disorders or problems. And she said, why? And I said, well, your interesting assumption that fat women can't get up the stairs. There are a lot of fat women who are very fit. There are a lot of anorexic women who couldn't get up the stairs, actually. There are lots of different things. There's also a lift. I'm not quite sure where you're coming from and where your prejudice is. And she went, well, just when you're that big and you're all sweaty. And I was like, fucking hell. And I didn't pass her, clearly, to be able to work with those people. So Leather Lion says 100%. Cinder says, I've seen a lot of toxic behaviour too in therapy groups. It was one of the reasons why I quit a group. Yeah, I think you've got to have a very good therapist to lead a therapy group. There is a lot of interesting stuff that goes on. It's very hard to control. But I would also argue you've got to have a very good therapist or a very experienced therapist who, mind you, experience doesn't mean anything either sometimes, but even to work with a couple or a polycule, because you have to watch for these things all the time. Sometimes you have to let them work through a little bit and then you have to bring them back in. Michelle says, being larger doesn't mean we aren't happy. Fucking 100%. 100%. It's interesting what we deem as healthy or unhealthy. And Bella says, your cat's adorable, Cinders. I've often felt very excluded by the ladies at work, and the only thing I can assume is my neurodivergence. They infantilize me despite the fact I have more life experience in my pinky than they have in their lives. But I'm bitching myself and I'm happy that they're uncomfortable in my presence. I really understand that, Bella, but isn't it a shame that we have to become defensive and attack because we don't feel like we're accepted, often by women? Cindy says, yeah, there's a major issue in our with in-out group fighting, and the group was led by volunteers rather than trained staff. do you know what? Even trained staff sometimes, like we get it wrong as well. You really have to look at your own bias when you're working with a couple. You really have to be aware if you're in a polycule or a family, that who am I going for? Whose side am I on? Why am I? What's happening to me here? Am I drawn to that charm? I've got a client who's just stopping for a while, who's about to go into couples therapy. And her biggest fear, she has this incredibly charming husband, is that the last time they went for couples therapy, he even said, that therapist is certainly on my side, isn't she? And it was utterly there, and no one called the therapist out on it. Look, we make mistakes. What's good is you can call us out on it. That's what's really important. We can say, interesting, that might be right. What's going on here? So Honey says, work in a women-dominated field, women can be brutal to each other. It's very sad. I agree. Bella, I certainly don't envy my last therapist that worked with me and the ex. Okay, sorry about that. Cinder says, Bella, oh thanks, I'm luring them both with food for it's part of the evening training routine. What I to like sit with you either side and just be part of the therapy. You will be part of this. It's not therapy, but you know, animals are so therapeutic, aren't they? So it's really interesting. We watched these little girls and we watched charming little children. I watched them in Cheers. Some are hypersensitive, some maybe neurodivergent, some maybe neurotypical. We've got all these little girls, especially in cheerleading, because it is mainly a girls or a women's sport. There are plenty of men, but they tend to be later. And you watch these cute little souls. Listen to the words I'm using on purpose. They're cute, aren't they? The little boys don't be so cute. It's interesting. So we already start to change the way we speak to children. And it's not just the infantilization because they're a child. It's the feminization or the masculinization. It's how we start to gender them. And this isn't just about gender. This is even deeper than gender. This is the expectations of behavior, expectations of everything that we put on them. Really Quiet says, I am AB, got my body commented on negatively by a tattoo artist. Wow. I retorted, lady, we are literally the same size. Did not help my body image issues. No, it can feel good in the moment, can't it? But why do we do it? It's so interesting. But you know, when you've got a teenager who really starts to lose it and doesn't feel good, what you've got is incredible things that start to happen when you've got a boy and a girl. And I really understand that for loads of people, it's like, no, I know my body. I'm not that gender. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the extremity of testosterone, estrogen, different levels. And I'm talking about the culturalization of little girls that we put into place and the socialization of little girls about how we expect them to behave. I heard this comment a long time ago, don't comment on anything about their body. If it's something they can't change today, happens anyway. Do you know what? I just think we should comment on other people. Like if someone's behaviour is shitty, why not call them out on it unless you're worried about getting stabbed? I think that's very different. You know, and if people want to say something about my weight or anything else as well, you know, I'll often say, I can change my weight. Your fucking personality is stuck unless you see a really good therapist, and even then it would take them years. I think we can use all sorts of things to say. Just being kind is quite interesting. I don't think we should be saccharine kind either. I think women also have to learn to use their voices, to speak up and to speak out. And that doesn't happen either. Bella says, yes, the 5-minute rule. If they can't change it in 5 minutes, don't comment on it. I mean, I'd really have to hold my tongue with a lot of people then, but I agree. So this isn't, Kara says, I'll give a compliment, nice hair, love the clothes style, whatever, but never about something that can't be changed. Mind you, you know, that's interesting. You have the most beautiful eyes. What a colour. I feel like I can see who you are. Like, I really love the love and the warmth behind them. You can't change your eye colour. Is that an acceptable compliment? It's quite interesting, isn't it? Like, can we? Like, what is a compliment? I think we have to use our fucking noggin and look at this. So, loads and loads of people have researched this sort of stuff over the years, and you've got all sorts of fields that cover it. You've got developmental psychology, which is really important. You've got evolutionary biology, which you can argue is and isn't. And you've got cultural anthropology, which has really covered this subject about the different patterns of aggression between reproductive, that teenage bit that says when we've got boys and girls, males and females at this time, because that is where the research is. I actually go out of my way to give positive feedback and input. People are generally just not typically nice nowadays to adults and children. Do you know what, Michelle? I think there's a real problem since COVID around a lot of people's behaviour. Something has definitely shifted. I'm not quite sure what it is. I've got lots of ideas on it, and I think there'll be a lot of research on it. Being isolated, coming back out, and people just focusing on themselves. People have got a little more selfish. I think driving is more aggressive. I think people are more aggressive. All the stuff we do online, the fact that we then kind of regressed into ourselves and we could say what we wanted online, all of these things have a huge influence. And COVID definitely did play a big part in that. It definitely did. So what you've got on average is absolutely classic cliches. Boys are likely to be more aggressive physically, physical acts of violence. That could be hitting, punching, spitting, kicking. Whereas the girls, females, I hate the words male and female. I'm just using words that we use in research, so please don't come at me for definition. Girls much more likely to be based on social aggression. It's how they bring down somebody else, and it's bitchery, obnoxious, harsh, cruel. Pre-COVID, there's stats released today about premature aging in teenagers that lived through the pandemic lockdowns. I saw a bit of that, and it's fascinating, isn't it? And we also know that it's going to add to morbidity and all sorts of things as well, and the likelihood of people being more ill. It's like going back to when we first found out about ACEs, like that if children have adverse childhood experiences, I reckon when they start to put out new ACEs in the next 5, 6 years, that they will turn round and they will absolutely say that that COVID was an ACE. I really do think as a time that COVID will become a serious adverse childhood experience. I've just been asked by somebody who's just popped in, what's the topic for today's meeting? So we're talking about girls being bitches, bitch on bitch. We're talking about the socialization. We're talking about inherited factors around that. We're talking about what that will mean in kink. We're talking about instincts versus socialization. And I'm going to be talking about lying amongst that and why that might be an influence on polyamory, pleasing, fawning, those sorts of things as well when it comes to kink. And I think they're things that have to be thought about. So if you've got a lot of research on this. If you want to look up people, you've got all sorts of stuff. Oh God, memory. There was a piece, a university, I think it was Rosalind Shute, who did some research with some other researchers as well. Sorry, I can't always remember everybody in my head, so I get a bit lost. They did a really interesting article cut over into this century, and they did a lot of research around adolescence and youth, and they were talking about this sort of behaviour. And they were talking about very typical behaviour of, like, I think they gave an example of a girl who was ill for 2 or 3 days, and she was very much part of this crowd. She was away for 2 to 3 days. By the time she got back, she was out of the crowd, she was ostracised, and she didn't know where to go, and she didn't have any friends. And that's very, very prominent, especially for young girls. Or they'll tell you stories about how they're left out of social groups, how they're picked on social media, how their friends also write these things. Like if you watch films like Mean Girls, anyone seen the thing Mean Girls? It's an interesting film. It's very much of its time. I also accept that as well. But it's just the meanness, it's the aggression, it's the nastiness. Now, of course, not everybody all the fucking time. Like I don't know how many times I have to say this, and it's so important to realise that we can't say every girl, every boy, every human. That's just not so, is it? That we have to look about the majority, the context of how this works. So we're not going to say that every girl is really, really horrible, but what we have is recurrent findings that actually often girls are socially aggressive, whereas boys are physically aggressive. So we tend to be crueler, we tend to be nasty, that cattiness, that's not so nice. And there's some really interesting anthropological studies on this as well that watch how girls do this. And again, this was a little bit later, this piece of research, looking at girls between 18 to 25, those sort of ages. So a little bit older, this group, and it really makes a difference. So Sinisters agreed, it is a life-changing event, rare too as the last pandemic in the UK, I think, was the Spanish flu. Add to that the increase of violent, toxic, abusive households. We've been feeling the ripple effects of COVID for a long time. I agree. And Spanish flu was actually founded in America. It was an avian flu that came over. It was a duck, I think, at the time, if you look at the research around that as well. And they had such a similar impact then as we did. But of course, they didn't have the internet. and they didn't have the capacity for people to communicate. But when we communicate, do we communicate effectively, kindly, and how do we work with this? So this piece of research that was done, when you're looking at the older human beings in this case, they asked participants on a scale of 1 to 10, they gave them a scenario and said, what are you going to be doing here? What does this look like? If it looks like somebody's talking about you and they're talking to somebody and they're back-mouthing you, would you strongly agree? Would you go against? And what would that mean? Would you feel that that person's gossiping about you? What would it look like? And they asked, what do you think would be appropriate as a form of response? Would it be physical? Would it be verbal? Would it be emotional? How would you do it if you had a treacherous classmate gossiping about you behind your back? And there were so many interesting differences in the aggressive forms of responses between women. So women the statistics were a lot higher. They would go for the other person's reputation. They would go for gossip. They would go for writing things online in forums. And they felt really socially appropriate, and that was okay. So even though they knew that it was socially inappropriate to gossip and to be mean and to be horrible, that's absolutely what they would have gone for. That's their first thing of attack that they would go for. This, and in this piece of research, what I find interesting is they're called informational warfare, and I think that's really true, isn't it? When women go for women. I always wonder as well, I remember years ago on Facebook, I was reading something, and I've mentioned this before, where I was watching this, it was a local, it's about Worthing, and so I live 5-10 minutes from Worthing. It's up the road, it's just across, it's not up or down anywhere, actually, it's just across, because I live right on the sea. So it's just across that way a little bit. And there was this thing, they were talking about this fucking cunt of a woman who's ruined a marriage, she's such a whore. My God, the words they were using, they were really attacking her. What was awful is they also said where she lived. So they said, she's out the fucking, you know where the station is? That florist, she lives above that fucking florist. Now, everybody knows now where this cunt and whore lives. And there were hundreds of comments. Can't believe she's ruined her family, can't believe this has happened. And the attacks were absolutely hideous. And when someone starts, that tends to carry on. Since this is really interesting, I've just seen a lot of the behaviours you mentioned on LinkedIn. I think you're seeing them everywhere, sadly. So, and what I found is this was escalating and escalating and escalating. And I was reading, I was thinking, oh my God, and I was reporting, I was like, someone needs to take this thread down, that everyone knows where this woman lives. And what was interesting, I also got quite fascinated about reading it. In the middle of it all, the woman who was the wife originally says, whoa, I'm the wife. I don't know where you're all coming from. This relationship happened afterwards. This woman is really nice to my children. Back off. Not one person listened to that. They still kept going for her. Talking about where she lived. Someone should fucking firebomb this whore's flat. Here we go. And then the man came on and said, the husband, not husband, said, wow, my ex-wife has just said, this is crazy. Why are we going here? But it's interesting, isn't it? Because they were just attacking. And we tend to jump on that bandwagon. And if this is a cliche cancellation campaign, yeah, for sure. When you've got somebody who starts attacking, and women are more likely to socially attack, people jump on a bandwagon. We love a bandwagon, and we're going to talk about double standards in a minute. There's a new program just come out in the last few days. I don't know if anyone's seen it on British TV, called The Traitors. I don't know if anyone's been watching it or are curious about it. I shouldn't say this, actually. I love reality. It's a bit too loud and it's in a recording. I fucking love reality TV. I know I shouldn't watch it. I know I shouldn't be part of it. And I know I shouldn't. Fucking love it. And The Traitors is about a group of people who can win a lot of money. And you've got the faithfuls, and amongst them you've got 3 traitors. And the traitors don't want to get caught, because if they win, they get the money, and the faithfuls don't want to be accused of being a traitor and everything else as well. And all these little cliques are starting, and all these little groups within it. And last night, for the first time, it took one person to accuse somebody of being a traitor. And as soon as that person started, they all went for this person. Because what we want when we think about the socialization of that is better her than me. And this woman lost her right hand, when her little boy was 4 years old. The reason she was on the program is because she wanted the money to win to get a bionic hand. And boy, did they go for her. Now, should we be sympathising and empathising because of her reason for being there? Boy, did everyone go for her. And it was awful to watch. And of course, they all found out that she wasn't the traitor, and they were all horrified afterwards. They were horrified at how wrong they got it, that they went for her. It was really interesting. And it's often, at that point, it's often a woman, first of all, and it's often a middle-aged woman. When you watch reality shows, what you'll find is it's often women and the mother figures. We just had I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here. It's often the women who are taken off first. Why? All those programs you think of, go back and have a look at them. Big Brother, Celebrity Big Brother, all those things that you watch, it's nearly always women. Why? So Cinder says, I agree, they are everywhere, but LinkedIn of all places is supposed to be a professional platform. The problem with professionals is they're humans first. However, so many people go for each other in the ways that some women rip each other apart online is scary to see things unravel so quickly. Agreed. And John says, and you see it on FetLife frequently with an extra dose of virtual signalling. Oh boy, we're talking about double standards in a minute. And Cinder says that's very true. John, if you want to know more, I recommend the podcast Fucking Cancelled. There are lots of good podcasts and different things that people can look at and read. But it's really interesting that we get into this informational warfare, that we really start to attack each other. So what is this about? Is it about an evolutionary argument? Is it social aggression? Is it about women fighting for their part? Is it because the woman wants to find a mate? Interesting, who knows? Is it form of mate competition? And when they looked at this, Hess and Hagen, they were the people that were doing this particular piece of research. It's what is it? So we have to look at what those things are. So evolutionary speaks for itself. Evolutionary, historical, cross-cultural. We know that what we're looking for is at evolutionary age range of when somebody is looking for a mate. Now you can tell and say it's fucking irrelevant. We live in a modern world. Do we? Honestly, do we? I really want you to ask that question. Do we really live in this enlightened modern world? Because some of the things I see, I don't think we do. I really don't think we live in an enlightened modern world. I think we like to think we do. And again, virtual signalling and that whole thing about double standards and I'm better and I know better, because I think it's there. Because if we can sabotage another woman in some way, shape or form, it puts us on one up. We still have this archaic belief, like, what's that game called when you bump a cat or whatever on the head, sorry cats, or a toy or whatever, and you're trying to kill them off. Can't remember what that game's called. You know, when you're like, is it whack-a-mole or whatever, something like that, isn't it? When you whack, whack, whack. We seem to believe as human beings, if I whack you and I ruin your energy, somehow it's going to bleed through the floor and come into me. I believe that if I destroy you, that somehow that's going to lift me up. Whereas actually, when a group of people get together, they are stronger and count on more. There's an irony here with feminism, egalitarianism, and all of those things is that actually, if people work together, they are more powerful. When we start attacking each other, we start to ruin everything. So Kate says it happens in the LGBTQI community with bisexual women. Look, I've been a bisexual woman from the start because that is very much that was the only option many, many, many years ago. So I was on those original 80s marches, quite a few of them. And to try and even be there as a bisexual woman, I didn't know what demisexual was then. Because it wasn't around as a label. I knew I was attracted to different people at different times. I've been a queer woman all of my life. I'm quite heteroromantic, that is so, and I am demisexual. Lots of labels, lots of labels. What I find fascinating was, oh my God, I was hated by lesbian women at that time. I really was, because I couldn't make my mind up, or I was pretending, or I was greedy. And that still sticks today. That still sticks as a really big thing. I like what you said as well, blowing out someone else's candle won't light yours. It won't, and we have to learn how to defend, we really do. And Cara said that was beautifully said, and Bella said, but if you get close to the flame, may catch your wick. Leaning in, you know, like the Gottman, I don't say the Gottmans are brilliant at absolutely everything, but they talk about couples therapy, they're really bad on porn, they're not so brilliant on poly and other things. Some of their tools are absolutely wonderful to use for couples. And it's interesting, it's all about leaning in and bids. And if we lean in and we lean into somebody else rather than leaning away, we're much more likely to set each other aflame and have that power between us. to carry on with Bella's metaphor, because that really matters. So why is it that female social aggression is there? And do you know what? It's not completely compellingly written yet. There are lots of theories around it's patriarchy, it's what we're brought in. However, what we do know is that it is really interesting. If you look at Jezebel.com, it's really interesting, some of the conversations that they have. It's fascinating to actually read. So we have to look at some painful truths here as women, because we are part of the problem. It's always us against the problem rather than one against each other. If that could be so, wouldn't that be wonderful? If the kink community wasn't so busy trying to destroy itself, imagine what we could do if we came together. If the poly community wasn't so busy trying to destroy each other, saying, you've got this right, you've got this wrong, this is the way we need to do it, because we're also fucking convinced we're right. And we'll cover that again in a minute when we look at double standards, as I say. It's a really good idea if we come together. How do we make sure that these things can work? There is a really good book, I can't remember the name of it, Women's Inhumanity to Women, something like that. It's a really good book. And when the author wrote the book, what they were being asked all the time was, how can we stop this? What should we do? Really quiet. I was discussing this with a gay friend who self-admittedly did not want to date bisexual men. We kind of started to arrive at there being some degree of insecurity about dating bisexual men as gay men, but they've got twice as many people to choose from, so they're twice as likely to leave you. That's just not true, is it? When you think about it, it's a little bit like, so I have a rainbow household. I'm a rainbow, very much. I have a rainbow household as well. My daughter is marrying a bisexual man at some point. The next one is pretty straight. The next one is completely demisexual. She's with a girlfriend. And the next one down is completely bi, like pan. She just loves human beings. Wants to get her hands on them. And it's really interesting to be part of that family, to watch these things happen. Because as I've watched my kids come out and do things and say things, often when you meet that 11-year-old who says, oh my God, she's come out as a lesbian and I've shared a bed with her, my first comment is, like, she fucking fancy you anyway. What is that assumption about? Why do we assume just because somebody likes girls that they're going to like all girls or all boys or all non-binary or everybody on the planet? Isn't it true that we don't just fancy everybody all the time? Isn't it true that even if we're straight, that we fancy only certain people at certain times? We might have a type, we might not. So it's really interesting, but that's where we go. So again, it's really important. Part of the problem here is it's really difficult as a woman to acknowledge that I might be aggressive, that I might be cruel, that I might be harsh, because it's a very socially unacceptable trait. When you watch a lot of the research that's interesting as well around women, is if you watch, I've said this before, but I'll ask you again, for anybody who identifies and or is a woman here, how many of you cry when you're angry? So when you're annoyed and angry, so a few of you put your hands up and a few of you might be writing. It's interesting, isn't it? Because actually, if you identify as a man and you are a man born or whatever, how many of them cry when they're angry? And the answer is always less. Why? Because socially, a woman is taught that anger is not attractive, that sadness is way more attractive and it's okay for her to do. We don't do that, that's not pretty. So instead of getting angry, she's more likely to get sad. And transaction analysis calls this racket feelings, where we put a feeling on top of another one that's way more socially acceptable. It's much more socially acceptable for a man to feel anger, let alone be aggressive. Again, I'm really aware I'm polarizing by talking about men and women here. That's what the research is about. So when we have a feeling that's a racket feeling, it's one that's put on top. I'm so tired, I'm just getting it all wrong. Actually might be fearful or something else. Envy, and I sometimes want to cry when I'm angry, but the tears don't come. It's so frustrating to be unable to cry then. But actually, anger isn't necessarily a crying feeling. It can be. It doesn't have to be. It is less so. It is a feeling that stokes up a fire that makes us feel motivated and makes us want to do something. I don't think aggressive is good. You're entitled to your anger, you're not entitled to your aggression. People get those two things very, very confused. And that happens a lot. However, what's interesting is in men, they're much more likely to become aggressive, not all the time, again, and that again, stereotypes. And women are more likely to cry when they're angry. And it's because it's what they're used to, it's what they've been taught. And even when we are non-binary, and that might have come later, if you've been brought up as a woman, got to do it. My girls cry every Disney movie, no matter how many times they've seen it. And I think that's a different reason as well, isn't it? That's that compelling heartstrings, because that's their maternal instinct and their baby instinct. I'm going to come on to that one in a minute. Did you hear the sarcasm? I think everyone can be violent when they feel threatened. Men are more likely to be physically violent, and women are more likely to be socially violent. Yeah? But there is a social stigma against a man being violent towards a woman. So I think that is suppressed, excluding abuse. So men experience violence from men and women, but women maybe only from women. I don't know if you saw the social experiments, John, that went out. They were online quite a while ago. There were lots of them around where you had a couple and you had a woman. First of all, you had a man being violent towards a woman. People started filming it. People started phoning the police. People started intervening and protecting the woman. I don't know if you saw these that when they were going around. And then what was interesting is they did the same experiment later with a woman being violent towards a man. People filmed it and laughed. They thought it was funny. They thought there wasn't a problem with it. And they wondered why people had a problem with it. That says a lot about our socialization and where we go with this. However, what I'm really pleased about is women are being arrested more and more and more for domestic violence that they are creating and are being jailed for it as well. When I'm fertile, if I cry, I'll cry if my cat meows at me in a certain way. My housemate laughs at me. So I think what we need to be aware of here is testosterone and estrogen and the roles that they play as well. So this can happen to all genders. It's your level of testosterone, it's your level of estrogen. What you've got to remember about testosterone is testosterone blocks tears eventually, depending on the higher levels that there are. So if you are a human being that has more testosterone than this person, you are way less likely to cry. If you have a lot more estrogen and less testosterone, you are way more likely to cry. So estrogen is the crying hormone. It's what it does to us. It releases that. So it isn't just men and women. It isn't just that definition. It's our levels of estrogen and our levels of testosterone. So like, for example, all my estrogen is being killed off in my body at the moment because my cancer is estrogen positive. So I'm only 2.5 years out, 3 years out. They are still killing off my estrogen. That means my body is less supple than it was. All my ligaments, everything hurts a lot more. It's been pulled. Estrogen allows for a lot more plasticity and suppleness in the body. It does a lot of things. It's not just about our feelings. And it also allows more tears. And I've definitely noticed that I cry a lot less since my estrogen is being suppressed. I still cry. I cry crazy. I used to cry at the fucking Simpsons though. It's not, straight away. There are floods of tears. My estrogen levels are quite high. But because my estrogen is being blocked and stopped as much as possible, I'm definitely crying less. I've learned over the years, says Cinders, that anger is a great asset to me. It is. I don't aggressive. And I love that because that's the really most important definition between the two, isn't it? You are entitled to be angry. You are entitled to feel angry. You can feel angry, and you don't have to be aggressive. But now I channel the anger to get things done. I picked up an interesting book this week about the link between forgiveness and anger. So you've just been asked what that is. Karis asked, and Cinder says, Deb, that is a valid point. My mother physically and mentally abused my dad. He used to finish work at 4 p.m. but sit on a park bench somewhere for hours. Oh. This was in the 80s, and sadly, there was no support for him then. It's so sad, isn't it? There are some fantastic charities out there now for domestic and abuse and domestic violence for all genders in every way. Does that mean the contraceptive pills that contain estrogen affect a patient's mood due to estrogen? 100%. Yes. So we really have to watch the pill and the hormones that we put in our bodies. And there is no research, that's a lie. There's not enough research into any of this about pill, and let alone when women hit the menopause. It's just not researched enough. So yes, it does. So Karashi sent you the book. That's good. That's nice. You're all being lovely to each other. So I think part of the problem is it's really hard, isn't it? Women rely on women to be their friends. We often talk, On average, men do not have as many friends as women do. Men don't tend to talk. That's why male suicide is way higher than female suicide, women's suicide. Again, bloody words, bloody definitions. So we really have to watch that, because girls reach out to girls. It used to be that families lived in huge communities. We used to say that it takes a village to raise a child. Now, those villages can be cruel, socially not so nice, everything else as well. And at the same time, people spoke to each other and had a lot of support. People are becoming more and more and more and more, not introverted, but cut away from that sort of system and that family and that group. And that can be very good if your family's toxic. It can really not be good for you if you don't have people around you. So we tend to rely women on women best friends. It's often what happens. But it's interesting, because one of the pieces of books that I was reading a little while ago, I'll remember the book name in a minute, sorry, but we are almost emotionally groomed to listen. We are emotionally groomed to empathize, to sympathize, and to really be the one that cares, because that's what's been taught down the generations as to the way it should be. Why is that? Female on female aggression, actually, in competition, again, there's research over this, is actually pretty normal. So we talk about, is that hardwiring, or is that some kind of internalized sexist type belief that happened as well? If you think about books and you think about history and you think about women in general, if I sort of say to you, like if you think about not just religions, actually religions as well, let's go for Christianity. What have you got? You've got the mother of Jesus Christ, who is a fucking virgin and a beautiful blessing of a woman. And then you've got Mary, who is this worthless whore. If you go to different, much older religions, you've got the virgin, you've got the mother, and you've got the crone. Jesus, which one would you like to? Fucking hell. Can I just not choose any of those, please? I don't want to be the virgin. I fucking love sex and I like to get laid. I don't want to just be a mother, because all I fucking do is look after someone else. Oh, that's it. So I'm just going to be a fucking crone who nobody wants. Fantastic. Let's go for that. We've got all these really interesting perceptions of women that are out there that are given to us over history. You've got, if you even take Disney, Master Jim was talking about Disney films. What are your things about women and Disney when we look back? Evil Stepmother, Wicked Witch, Pretty Young Princess, who clearly has to look at everything. Oh, the crone is the wise one. She definitely is. She's my favourite out of all of them. I'm not sure I want to be that. That is true, Gareth. I was just thinking the same. She's wise, she knows better than anyone else, but she's also often ugly, deformed, bent over, and very wrinkled, and she can't be beautiful as well. But, of course, a crone can be beautiful. You can be wise, beautiful, a mother. You can be all of those things, or you could be a crone and a virgin. That's the point, isn't it? We can be all of these things, but we attack people for everything that they do all the time about this. So we might have some internalized belief about how we do this. When you call someone a stepmother, I don't think that always has a good reputation. It makes you think of stepmothers, like it makes you think of Disney, it makes you think of all of those things. It doesn't make you think of beautiful blended families. We also really have this issue when women fail us. When a woman leaves the home and leaves the children, what do you think about her compared to the man that leaves the children? The husband, the father. When you've got two women who are married, who has the kids? And how is one woman potentially demonized if she doesn't see them as much or doesn't do things? We tend to demonize women and don't fall into these expectations about what they should look like in life and why they should be, if they're not compassionate and they're not caring. And we give a lot more compassion, not always, for, all right, see you later, bye. We tend not to forgive women when they fail us. I like the character Maleficent. But do you like the new Maleficent? Because she's powerful and she's strong and she's incredible. Or do you mean the old original Disney Maleficent, who is a completely different character? We are changing. When you look at Fiona and Brave, and you look at Frozen, and you look at all the different characters that we're getting, things are starting to change slowly now, but this stuff takes a hell of a long time. But we tend to have, yeah, exactly. Like, I agree with you, Simon. She's a fucking awesome woman standing there. She is good. So when we're talking about Woman's Inhumanity to Woman, and that is a book as well. Should we talk about, yes, let's talk about Inhumanity too. But, you know, you've also got this grandma that gets it really wrong because she puts so much pressure on these women and these men actually to all be a certain way, and it's all her fault. It's still a woman's fault in Encanto. You notice that? She pushed too hard, she shouldn't have done it right, she pushed them all, she ruined Bruno's life, she ruined everyone's life. Generational trauma here. And I love Encanto. I could sing you every song, and I get that people really loved the song about strong women and different things. And Dos Orejitas was the song that was put forward to win, and everyone hoped that it would do really well. Dos Orejitas, do you remember that one? So it was like, but everybody loved, we don't talk about room, no. That one about the man. And come on, it's always there. Which is a bit harsh in me, I know. So again, this book, Woman's Inhumanity to Woman, again, what she said, what she was talking about is women say, how do we do this? How do we start to? Surface Pressure was my number 2 song on my Spotify Wrapped. I don't know, it's a really good one. So it spoke to so many people, didn't it, about that pressure of how we're supposed to be. And if you look at some of those jokes and things that go around, I love that Australian sketch with the coffee table. Do you remember that Australian sketch that went around quite a few years ago about the coffee table, the magic coffee table? Does anyone remember that one? It's a bit jokey. And he's like, he calls in the coppers and he's like saying, I really need some help. You know, like my wife's disappeared. I can only think that she's gone through the coffee table because it's stopped working. And basically what he was saying, and it's really fucking facetious and sarcastic, I get it, but there was this magic coffee table because whatever he put on there was tidied up by the morning. And then he wondered why his wife had left. Because of course there is no such thing as a fucking magic coffee table. However, there's this pressure, because we can also talk about, there's a really interesting French cartoonist called Emma, and she talks about the mental load and the mental load on women, because women are brought up to try and think ahead and to plan these things. And that's an interesting pressure as well. Whereas men are often brought up in a way, it sounds like I'm man-hating. I fucking love men, not man-hating, so don't put that on me. And this is, and again, I'm going to blame women here slightly. We bring up these men to think that they don't have to do anything. We cook and clean and wash and look after them as parents without saying, no, this is your responsibility as well. It's really important that you do these things. Why do we do that? And I've written a piece on FetLife ages ago, begging women to stop lying about orgasms. Why do you lie? Why do you lie that you come? Why do you lie? And often what a woman will say is, oh, it just makes it stop though, or just makes it happen quicker, I can't be bothered. But what we're doing each time we lie to a man or another woman, it doesn't matter, or someone who's non-binary, it doesn't fucking matter. What we're doing is perpetuating the myth that we all come from penetration and we all come with every single person. So when I meet your fucking ex-partner who thinks their cock is God, or their fingers are God, or their mouth is God, we are all causing problems for each other. We need to be collectively balanced about that one. And we need to stop lying. But that's really hard. And I think sometimes we can feel, under a lot of pressure because we're very worried and we're scared as well. So that comes into it. Miles says, truth. Cinder's better. Oh, I've been working on generational trauma in the past few years. It's made me unpopular to some extent, but geez, the crap that has been pushed forward stops with me regardless. And you know, I tell you what, those cinders, in order to make it stop, you have to undo the cellular level generation that comes with that. And that is some very deep, heavy work. Because transgenerational trauma, epigenetic scripting, can jump through 20, 30, 40, 50 generations. The research lists at least 16 currently when we look at transgenerational trauma. So transgenerational trauma means the stuff that we pass to the next generation, either caused by our own experience or by our forefathers, mothers' experiences that they've had. And the thing I always say with this is, if you think about this, is you were inside your grandmother on a cellular level. When your mother was in the womb, she had all of her eggs inside her. Isn't that crazy to think about? That, you know, this sort of stuff that comes around. And then the experiences that we have in our life, if we're looking at epigenetics, they change us. They change the way we read our DNA. It's not as simple as it changes our DNA. So, and it's really important that we understand that, because we pass down trauma for thousands of years potentially. Bella totally agrees. It's hard work for sure. It's why I want a solid plan before having kids. I've had practice with an ex-partner's kid. and try my hardest to understand what I need to work on, thank goodness. And do you know what? I'm going to say something really horrific to you, Bella. You will never be a brilliant parent. You will never get it right. You won't, because that is parenting in a nutshell. We fuck it up, and that hasn't changed, and that won't change. Because what we have to do is understand that when we try and counter what we were taught, we tend to overcompensate the other way and we cause different issues. And then we don't get it right for the child that's in front of us. There is just no such thing. You know, we're all just fucking human. And we make mistakes. But what we've got to do is teach our children distress tolerance, teach our children boundaries, teach our children that sometimes boundaries need working on in a different way, that they're not entitled to their feelings if they're acting like a cunt. They're entitled to their feelings if they learn how to manage them. There's a big difference. I'm watching so many issues at the moment. Comfort is our worst enemy. It's funny, actually, is it? That's quite an interesting one. I think happy is a real enemy. I think when we look at extremes of, I just want to be happy. Okay, right, that'll be fine then. And we wonder why we're mad. I think it's really important to learn balance. Ex-kiddo's been taught to know since she was able to understand that she now uses it against me every opportunity. I love it. She also has to learn how to say yes as well. If we teach too much no, oh God, isn't it? It's that pendulum. It's a fucking, oh, I hate it. It's a pendulum. How do we find the balance where actually in order to work, in order to manage school, in order to manage friends, you have to learn. I think the misconception around boundaries nowadays is boundaries are actually being used to control other people. Boundaries are supposed to keep us safe. That's what they're there. They're not there to control somebody else. I was working with a couple today, and what was interesting, she was saying, no, but he should do this. This is really important to me. And I said, well, hang on a second. That's really important to you, and I understand that. But what if the way he is really important to him? And you know what, this client's great. She was like, oh, yeah, no, I understand that, actually. I said, it's all about how do we find that balance in the middle? And then we have to learn to compromise, and it's quite hard to learn. And women have been taught to over-compromise for so many years that transgenerationally it is traumatic, and we tend to fawn, and we tend to fuck, and we tend to flop, and we tend to give up. So it's so important. Karen says, I think we learned to criticise women from our mothers and grandmothers. Boy, did we, didn't we? Come on, can't you tell stories about your mum being a complete bitch about another woman? You've heard those things, haven't you, where, oh my God, like I loved my mum. She died last year. She was a beautiful, incredible woman with her own trauma and bits and pieces that she had as well, without a doubt. However, especially against weight, she was saying, it's a shame because she's got such a pretty face. Fucking, are you kidding me? The sort of stuff we say. And my mum had anorexia at times, and my mum's overweight at times. Oh God, the impact that has on you as a child when you're trying to eat and you're trying to do everything, wow, it's absolutely horrific. Plus, my mum was a martyr. Too many women are martyrs. And it's really difficult to live with a parent who's a martyr because it teaches you to either be a martyr or to be some kind of persecutor because you don't want to be the martyr. I won't have a piece of pizza. Everyone else can have it. Yeah, I'll get up at 1 and come and get you from the party because look what a wonderful mother I am, or what a wonderful human I am. No. So yeah, it's an age up. In the old days, our life depended on being a proper woman. Yeah, it really did, and it was that socialization of fitting in because you've got to remember, I was born in 1965. I have a Swiss passport. Women didn't get the fucking vote. Cuckoo clock. See how appropriate was that at that timing? Women didn't get the vote till the 70s in Switzerland, and in hundreds of countries they still don't have the vote. They don't have any rights as human beings, actually. So I think it's really important that we understand that actually this is really new stuff, and it takes thousands of years for stuff to change and become in place, hundreds at least, if not thousands. So the stuff we're fighting for, we will see in about 5 or 6 generations, maybe 10. So it's still really important that we fight for it. We're just not going to get it immediately. So Karen also said, it's an age-old pattern. Yeah, we needed to fit into a mould, otherwise there was no future for daughters, agreed. And that's the ugly stepsisters, isn't it? That's Cinderella. I want these two to marry the prince. Cinderella can go fuck herself. I don't care if I cut my daughter's toes off. I don't care if I cut her heel off. Because the only thing that will mean that she's of any value is if she marries a prince. We need it to fit into a mold or there's no future. It's an age-old pattern that's held a life-saving function in a different time. But you see, Karen, it's not in a different time. It's in my time. I don't feel that old at 57. I really don't. And I brought up my children still from that generation, you know, and my parents were brought up by fucking Victorians. So it takes a long time for this stuff to change and get through, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't do it. It means we should be doing it. Oh, absolutely. She's a keen yes about her nose powerful. My mum too, but the old Cinder says my mother's a bitch. Oh dear, relatable, says Karen. I think martyrdom was the only way for her to have any power as a woman, and it definitely was. Boundaries are a personal responsibility. They're about safety. I've written a lot about boundaries over the time. So in order to move this forward as women, we have to admit that aggression can be acceptable, but it doesn't have to be mean or nasty. It's really important to hold a boundary, to say, don't talk to me like that, don't do those things. I think we have to be able to accept criticism. I don't like the way you do that. Right. No, why are we so cruel when we jump on? What's the truth in that? If that's the impression that I'm getting, so transactional analysis also talks about that social recognition when we meet somebody else. And if somebody's got something to say about you, if it's said around you quite a lot, what's the truth in it? Not always. And it's interesting to look at what is within my power to change. What can I do instead of looking at the world changing everybody else? Be the difference you want to see in the world is a really strong one for me. I think anger is really important for women, and I think women should be angry. However, I don't think they should do that social aggression against other women, and I think that makes a real difference as well. So we have to learn to ask for what we want, clearly, state it, communicate it. And we need to not make other people in our lives mind readers. We do that a lot as women. Well, if you cared for me, you'd know. I do care for you. I don't know. You're going to have to tell me. I don't know. But we've, again, been brought up with this fairy tale thing of we live with mind readers. When we don't get what we want, we're not okay, we can get so enraged, so disconnected. And I've watched this in relationships all the time, regardless of gender, actually, that we need to state what we want and we need to state it clearly. I think gossip is really important as a part of life. We gossip. People gossip. It's one of those basic socializations that we do. Why do we then turn it just against women? Is that something we could stop? Is that something we could change in some way, shape, or form? That would really help. And to understand that no woman is perfect. I watched a TikTok this morning. Yes, I do watch some TikToks. Sorry, really disappointing. And it was really interesting what this woman did. She had this, I don't know if any of you saw it, she had these fantastic grey dreadlocks, and she was a very beautiful woman. And she was like, she did this thing, she said, what men see. So she was like all seductive and very beautiful. And she was like, what men see. And she was giving it all of this with her makeup and her eyes. And then she said, what women see. And then what she did is she focused in and she showed that her false eyelashes were not on correctly and they were a bit off, and that her skin, her makeup wasn't quite right, stuff like that. And I thought, oh, fucking hell, I really hope that isn't true. Could it be? Do we pick on other people? Yes, we do. And we can be really cruel, but I hope that that isn't where we are and what we're going. I said I wanted to talk about double standards, because double standards are not just in all humans, but they're very strongly in women. And actually, double standards in themselves really started to come about from toxicity in relationships. The toxicity with your parents, the toxicity in the way that they did things, and again, with women. So most of us have a double standard. You know that statistics, damn statistics and lies principle of 99% of people absolutely categorically states they do not want to be lied to. And 97% of people say that they lie. So does that make just sort of like under 2% of us decent human beings? Everybody tells lies. Every single one of you tells a lie, even if it's a nice lie, even if it's a kind lie, even if it's an under or an over exaggeration about something. People lie every day about something. But we learn to lie in our own way because of double standards as well. That makes a real difference. And that's often, we've been taught by our parents to have double standards, and we emotionally and unconsciously learn it because of the emotional conditioning. Interesting question I've just been asked. Any advice for navigating slander and defamation between women, particularly in the BDSM community? Do you know what? I'm going to go with shit doesn't stick. This is really extreme. And it does. It sticks on a lot of men. I think men are very attacked at the moment, and women aren't attacked as much when you watch what's happening on the scene. Often, as Bella says, what it is time. And I think it's also about turning around and saying to somebody, that's slanderous, or we shouldn't say it. I think it's about engaging with somebody. But what you will find is people who know you, I don't know if it's about you or somebody else, if it's a decent human being, when people get to know you, they'll get to know that it isn't you. And they'll get to know that that isn't true and that's not so. And it's always about sticking consistently to who you are as a human being. People will slander and attack people all the time. I get it sometimes. I think most people think I'm quite a nice human being, and then other people go, who the fuck she thinks she is, and they attack. I really get both. I very rarely tend to get something in the middle. I remember waking up years ago, I was just about to go to bed. I'm on Facebook and I'm having a look, and there is my photograph, which was taken from a Plenty of Fish profile. In the last year. I hadn't been on Plenty of Fish for years. I didn't get it at all. And there was my business website, Grey Matter Psychotherapy, and it was all about cheer. And it said, do not let this woman near your children. She's a paedophile. And it was all over Facebook and social media. Wow, that was interesting. Turns out it was instigated by a man who asked two women, of course, to attack. He'd been stalking me for quite a while. And the reason I was a paedophile is because I'm a submissive woman, by the way. I didn't engage. I just went straight to the police and said, hey, can I do anything about this and report this? And they said, absolutely. And I asked them to stop, did all I can to ask them to stop. And the reason he wanted to destroy me was because I'd just been asked to do the biggest cheer meeting that you can do in the UK. I've been asked to talk about it. So it's always about, this is my boundary, this is what I want to do, this isn't acceptable, please take it down. And it's about not overreacting and not panicking as well. It's about not engaging half the time. Now, you will get slated and slandered for that as well. Oh, no smoke without fire, you're doing things really wrong. But actually, if we over-engage and we over-defend, we can't win either. It's really difficult. Bella, I really wish I knew. Usually I give it time to blow over. It often does. John says, walk away. Nice Kitty says, I'm my brother's keeper. I stand up for my people and confront those causing drama. We have to, or the crap runs rampant. There is something in that as well. I think, especially if other people knew you, it's how we engage with that, though. Because if we become too defensive and we attack the other person, then again, there's no smoke without fire. We have to think about subtlety, don't we? Bella, don't entertain it, generally speaking. The people who matter won't make a big deal out of it, and the people who make a big deal out of it don't matter. There are a lot of people on social media who have a lot to say, but actually don't have anything to do with the scene and don't have anything to do with people locally. I very much believe the truth out, even if it takes a little bit of time, because people really show themselves and people keep having a go. I've got a client who's part of the jewelry space and she's been accused of sexual assault by another person who has caused numerous issues with numerous people over the time. And the reason she's been accused of sexual assault is because she put her arms around her from behind. They've done this sort of cuddling before. It's been really normal. This time she didn't have a bra on, so her breasts had dropped a little more. And when my client put her arms around her, she probably grazed a boob. But the person has said she grabbed my nipples quite viciously on purpose. There is even a camera showing that this didn't happen. There is absolute video proof of this not happening. And it's all about the calmness that we can bring to ourselves to say the truth out. Because this person has made horrible, slanderous comments about other human beings. And then when people have responded, she then stops the thread. She takes it off and people will say to her, you wrote that about me. No, I didn't. You did. I've got a fucking screenshot. Like, it's here. And I didn't. There is a screenshot. You did. And I think there's a lot of toxicity amongst people at the moment. And I think what people are learning to understand is that toxicity is around and we have to really be careful about who we're talking to. Smokeless Galaxy, oh my God, sorry you had to go through that. There's some really crazy people out there. I mean, do you know what? If there was some truth in it, that would have been very different. Jesus, it's just because I'm kinky. Cinders, I take the same approach, Bella. Sometimes asserting boundaries helps, but things can snowball. As long as you know what you're doing, what's right for you, and not hurting others, ignoring things can be the best option. Thanks, says the person. Communication isn't an option. Time suits the best course. It just sucks. It does. Get some help. Get some support on how to see those things through, about how to assert your boundaries, about awareness, about how you talk to people who love you and who are there for you, and ask for their help in that moment, because it's really difficult. I feel like the focus is still largely on men in the community, but it's starting to shift as more people realise that women can be harmful as well. And I agree. Women are very guilty of grabbing other women's boobs, or touching other women, actually, because they feel like they've got this right. And it's quite interesting. Why do we do that? I think it's all about respect for other people. I think that's really important. I feel like the focus is still largely on men. So women are sometimes attacked, slandered, etc. if they're suspected of causing harm. And often what you'll find is if you've got like a dom sub couple and then male female, the female will get attacked, the woman will get attacked massively because she's created it for the man. I find that interesting as well. Learn to pause rather than react. Choose how and if to respond. It's a good point. It's a really difficult point for a lot of people to achieve. A lot of people find that almost impossible to do, because they haven't learned how to be okay with themselves and how to take that breath and how to breathe out to be okay. And I think that's really important for all of us to learn. You can get some therapy over that, you can get some help over that. I think if you listen to your heart pounding, that's the wrong time to act. If you're having physiological symptoms to something, I couldn't breathe for a few seconds, it felt like, and it's not true when I read this. And I really had to breathe out, way more important than breathing in that moment, because we're probably hyperventilating. And it's just, let me now start to investigate. How far spread is this? What does it look like? What does it mean? And we really have to look at the implication of what's happened there. And actually, sometimes me responding in a really angry mood doesn't help. One of the things I offer to a lot of my clients is, if you want to write an email, write it to me. I'll then write it back to you. It'll be very different. And that's the one you can send. Because when we take out all the emotional points, the emotional aspects, and you just stick with the facts, it's difficult, because what people then try and do is pull you into the emotional. And if we can just stick with the facts and just stick with the basics, people are accused all the time in BDSM about all sorts of things, and most of the time that will be very true, and sometimes it isn't as well. So we have to learn to look at the facts. Somebody said, why doesn't FetLife do something about this? And FetLife should do something. FetLife cannot and will not do anything about it if somebody says something about somebody else. If you look at legality, even in a court, your memory is not very admissible in a court. You need proof. And the problem is, with a lot of things, when we start having a go at each other, there is no proof. It is perception. And that becomes moral or immoral. They're very different. So actually, looking at should I even engage in this is a really different point. So we have to be really careful. Take a breath. Take a moment. The problem is, again, to loop back to what we're talking about, is if we've been taught about this as a child, if this has been emotionally created in us, it's really difficult, because what we believe is, a very common thought process is that people think like me. We can all go like, yeah, I'm pretty normal. People see the things the way I do, even if we're not, whatever fucking normal means, because I hate that word. Neurodivergent, divergent, yeah, most people think like me. Or when we really start to understand that we might be neurodivergent, nobody thinks like me, I think differently. And that's not true when we find our communities. But we tend to think, on average, people relate similarly. People do things very similarly to me, and that's really something dangerous. I often write a bitchy response, then never send it. That's very good. Do not do that by email. Do not do that on a text. Go and write it by hand, seriously, and then put it in the bin. Because the amount of people that press send by mistake is also quite high. So while I might recommend that, don't do it digitally. And also I would say professionally nowadays, we don't tell people to hit a cushion when you're angry. And if you write something, sometimes that can actually confirm your bitchy response. And as the source says, what happens is when you respond, you give the other person your energy. So I agree with this, you give the other person your rightness. So sometimes you don't always have to write something. Sometimes it's really good just to have a little bit of a conversation in your head of, is that true? How does that work? I don't want to give you the right to have power over me to even say that that's true in any way, shape or form. So sometimes when we confirm stuff by writing, that can also go against us. Not always, because it can be a really good idea. We don't always need to act on anger aggressively or bitchily or anything else. It's really difficult. I had a client who could just not conceive the idea that other people might think differently from her. Yes, exactly. And that's my point. Such a common way of thinking. We also have double standards when we think about it. We have one set of expectations on some sets of people. We have one set of expectations on ourselves, and we have another set of expectations on other groups of people. Have you noticed that? In different walks of life? And they're so destructive, double standards when we look at them. So I've got 4 daughters. If you say to me, do you treat your children the same? What do you think I will say? What's your thought process that I should say? Or if you've got 4 or 5 children, because I've got 4. The truth is I can't treat them all the same. You can't. But what we used to say is, yeah, we treat our children the same. I treat all my children the same. Of course I do. It's just inconceivable. You cannot manage to do that. Each child, as Bella says, has a different need. Each child has a greater need at a different time. When I had 4 under the age of 6, 6 or 7, at one stage I was like, fucking, none of my kids walked till they were 20 months. Like, as soon as I gave birth to one, I've got one under one, one under another. Like, what's more important, changing a nappy, feeding a child? What if they've hurt themselves? How do we fulfill or define that criteria as to how we treat people and what we do? We all have double standards. We talk about fairness. We might give them the same amount of money. That's not true. My 2 youngest bleed me dry over money at the moment. They are very needy when it comes to money. My older 2 do not, because they don't have the same need, because they earn very differently. My youngest is really struggling at the moment, emotionally, mentally, in every single way. So she's way more draining. So I give actually quite a lot more to her, but I'm also bounded over some things. And what I've got to watch then is this one might need a bit more, but won't ask because she knows that this one is asking. So you're forever second guessing yourself about how it works and what to do. And these 2 are so fucking independent and they're amazing. So already I'm now not treating them fairly because they're not amazing. We've all got our problems and these 2 are still amazing. But that's where we go. So why do double standards exist? Why do we do that? Why is it that when I work with families, it's really interesting. There is always a black sheep in the family. There is always that old notion of that child who is the naughty one, who is always to blame. And there is always a child that's defined as that. It happens all the time. And this shit is done out of awareness and it's absolutely destructive and hideous. So because as parents we have those emotional responses, we create double standards. We really do. And we enact 2 different standards, the way that it works. And there's quite an interesting bit of research. I think it was, somebody Adams, can't remember their name, really sorry, but I'm sure you can look it up, where they talked about where do double standards come from and what does it, somebody Adams, I think it's a woman, I can't quite remember her name, but anyway, she talks about the origin of double standards, where do they exist and where do they come from? And it is about relationships, it is about parenting, it is about our own way, because our parents create this system in us about how we give and how we take emotional support and what that looks like, and then what we say versus what we do. And this is really interesting, especially when it comes to girls, because actually we often bring up our girls to be good emotional caregivers. And if you're not a good emotional caregiver, you've failed as a girl. Because that's what girls are supposed to do. You're supposed to look after everybody else. You're supposed to have the crown. You're supposed to have the baby. The boy is supposed to drive the car and the tank and kill people with guns. And the girls are supposed to have a toy kitchen. And we say, no, that doesn't exist anymore. Of course it fucking does. It's everywhere. Of course it does. And it's still seen in schools. And it's what we tend to say is if we're a caregiver, that's super strong. It's super amazing. You're really achieving, especially as a girl. Aren't you wonderful? So we can really program people to be takers or givers. And we really have to watch that as human beings because that's not fair. The perfectionism, I'll always say, especially professionally, is that as human beings, we are our own worst enemies. It's the shit we put on ourselves that we've taken in from others often But then actually we're our own worst enemy, because now we're the ones who aren't sorting this stuff out emotionally in any way, shape or form. So the conditioning that we get skews our evaluation of ourselves and of others, and we distort it. And then we think there's one rule for us and one rule for them. The amount of people I watch in relationships, because I've seen an awful lot of couples over the years, an awful lot of polycules. I've got over 50,000 hours of practice. Like, that's a big practice. So I've seen thousands and thousands and thousands of relationships, and it's all about double standards. And calling them out is really hard because people don't want to see it. I think they should tidy up. I think they should put their socks in there. I think they should do this, and I think they should do that. Because my way is right. I've been taught this way. It is right. That's the way you should do it. And I've often given the example of when my second eldest partner lived here for a while. He would put his own washing on sometimes, which is absolutely fine. And other times he would chuck in washing with ours. It varied. And my youngest daughter would look at the way he hung his washing, and she would say, well, that's wrong, Mummy, isn't it? What's wrong? But, you know, that's a double standard, right? He would fold jeans over in half and then put a sheet over them. Of course that's wrong. What's going to dry like that? But that's my point. We all think we know better. Of course, I hang my washing up to the point. I don't fold it over the top. I don't want to have to iron it. And I've got it all perfect done. Fuck me, did my mother bring a person who could wash anything, clean anything, like just those stereotypes that fall in with these double standards. And I remember saying to my youngest, Erin, it's not wrong, it's just different. But why we think ours is better. So when you've got a couple in front of you, or a polycule, or different people who are living together who say, they should do that because I've got it right. Because that's really what we're saying, aren't we? I fill the dishwasher better than you do. You should do it my way. Is it just different? Is it better? Does it matter? It's really interesting where we go with this, because we really have a go. And we've got to watch this because it impacts self-esteem, it impacts how people work with each other, and it's a horrible thing to watch, because we all think somebody's lovely if they've got this lovely instinct, you know, they've got this maternal instinct. Isn't it wonderful? You've got that natural maternal instinct. I'm really sorry, women are not born with a fucking maternal instinct. An instinct is innate, right? It's innate, it's inborn, it's natural. It might be inborn now because of thousands of years of epigenetic scripting where we've told girls that their position is in the kitchen. It is there. Do you know how many women give birth to a child and then think, I don't know what the fuck to do with this. I'm a failure, I can't do it. In fact, can I just shove it back inside me because I actually don't think I want it. I don't know what to do with this. And lots of women feel that way. Yet we have a go and we say that is, you know what to do, you're the mother. Anyone here a mum? Anyone here not like your father? Did anyone know what to do innately? Or did you read a book beforehand? And actually, were you more likely to read a book because you're more likely to be the one holding the baby? Harris, I don't have a maternal bone in my body. It's interesting what that means. You might have caring bones in your body, but why do they have to be maternal? Master Jim, I'm not allowed in the kitchen. Is that because the girls see it that way, or is that so? And I think this is something it's interesting, isn't it? Because it's inherent in power dynamics. But if you've got a male slave, he's just as likely to be in the kitchen. If you've got a non-binary slave, they're just as likely to be in the kitchen. Is it slave or is it gender? Which one is it? And does it even matter? And actually, if we've got somebody who is non-binary, then that's interesting. How do we work that out? Cinder says same here, Gareth. Cinders, I've seen that happen in so many offices I've worked in the past, fights over how to pack up the dishwasher. Do you know domestic chores are one of the main causes of fights in relationships? Who takes out the recycling is one of the biggest. Co-parent here, says Bella. Sometimes I look at Kidder and wonder how on earth I'm responsible for such a gremlin-like creature. Children aren't easy. Harada, I'm a caregiver starting from childhood and child-free at the same time. Yes. Nice kitty. Master Jim's last. Master Jim, it's me setting the kitchen on fire a few times. But were you born that way, Master Jim, or is that the way you've been taught? Given your age, given who you are, is it because you weren't taught how to be in a kitchen? Nobody comes out with a fucking oven. That thing couldn't come out my cunt, right? We're not born with an oven. We're not born with oven gloves on. We're not born with a wooden spoon to try and stir up a batter to make a fucking cake. Although somebody did put a whisk inside me once, but that's another story. I knew I'd get that in somehow. So isn't it interesting that we say, but we immediately teach a girl how to help in the kitchen? My grandmother was so different from a lot of people. I found it quite interesting. My great-grandma was quite the feisty woman for those times. Gosh, I don't know. And what I found interesting is my grandmother taught her sons and her daughters how to cook, how to wash, how to clean, and how to do everything. I find that fascinating, and she was quite ahead of her time. And all my uncles just completely share all the chores and see it as really normal, which, by the way, we should. There is a should there for me. I get so annoyed when I tell people I'm not ever having kids and they press me on it because they think me enjoying caring for animals means I should have children. Of course you should. It's a fucking woman's duty. Oh, bloody hell. It's also a penis's duty. Like, it's so interesting that we put that on people, and it's never enough. Oh, you go to a wedding, your turn soon. You go to a christening, your turn soon. We go to a fucking funeral, it's still our turn soon, isn't it? At some point, why do we want to see this through? It's a bizarre set of pressure that we put on other human beings. And I think it's something to really think about. It just means nothing. Looking after animals is very different to children. So did they, says Master Jim. That was my sister's jobs. See what I mean? When they're growing up, the boys did the other chores. Yes, because there are blue jobs and pink jobs. Did you know that? Every household has blue chores and pink chores. Of course they do. The blue chores are mowing the lawn and putting the bins out, getting the coal in, doing the heavy lifting, and the pink chores are the cooking, the washing, the cleaning, the ironing. And what we know then is that is socialization. It is not instinct. Because we tell a child that that's what they're going to do. It's unrealistic. It causes anxiety and stress on human beings that you're instinctively going to know what to do. I actually don't care what your gender is. I give a flying fuck what your gender is when you're a parent. You do not instinctively know what to do. You have watched, you have learnt, you copy, you've got mirror neurons. That's what we do as human beings. Your gender is irrelevant. However, you also look to other people around you to learn all of those things. So that socialization is absolutely horrific. It's got nothing to do with instinct or ability. Do you know how many women give birth and actually don't like their child, don't love their child, and they don't know what they're supposed to do, but they're waiting for the supposed instinct to come in, and then they feel like failures and they set themselves up, and it's absolutely horrific. So it is mainly a myth, this idea of instinct and where we go. Look, some people, regardless of their fucking gender, do have that instinct to love and to care for, but it's not gender-based. There are people who are dads and non-binary parents and mums who turn around and say, yeah, I've got it. I've got this kid is mine. We watch step parents come in. We watch people turn and say, I'm going to adopt this child is mine. This is what I'm doing. And they fight for them and they love them. Is that an instinct? You might be more caring in some way. That might be there. And you might step up to a platform. That can be a different thing. But again, socialization. If I talk you through on the phone how to load a dishwasher, the likelihood of you doing it successfully are next to nil. Your dishwasher isn't mine. The spoon goes somewhere different. Maybe the prongs are movable. Yeah, although my way of loading a dishwasher is clearly correct. Of course it is. Same as where I hang my washing. It's clearly correct. Because it's correct for us. And this is the problem that we have. Yes, that's right for you. And that's great, isn't it? Like Jess says, everyone's dishwasher is different. Everyone's washing machine is different. The principles are the same. I do think dishwashers should be rear-loaded to make life easier, but I think life should be front-loaded to make life easier. That's the only time I use a dishwasher in my head. As soon as I can relate to that, because I'm polite, my dad has been hinting for grandchildren for years. He knows that I don't want children, but he still goes on about it. It is your duty to carry on the name. Do you know, I tell you what, when I was talking to a client the other day, this was really interesting because it's something that they hadn't really thought about, and this particular person is a man. And the upset, actually, to all of a sudden realise that actually I'm not going to have children and I'm not carrying on my name. But when you have a name with girls, the name dies anyway if they're going to take their husband's name. My name dies with me. I have a sister. My children have double-barreled surnames. People say, is that divorce or wealth? If you met my husband, it's both. Ex-husband, it's well, female, it's both. And that I find that quite interesting, because if and when they want to get married, they can choose what they do with their names. There is no responsibility for me to carry it on, to do that. They have no obligation to have children. I can't bear the thought of becoming a grandparent. The pressure on me to have to be the grandparent as well. Again, that's another pressure, isn't it, that we put on people. So we have to be really careful about this, because it's, again, regardless of your gender, it's just not relevant. Being a parent is really difficult to do, and it's really hard work. And I think I noticed quite a few months ago in one of the workshops that we were doing, I also spoke about the kink paradox, where we get lost in this concept of empowerment, egalitarianism, like of equality. And that's so contradictory when a woman then wants to submit or say, I'm the submissive, and it becomes a kink paradox. And that's really important too. Bella says, so it wasn't my previous family being abusive when they gave me all the chores. It was just they knew I was non-binary. Like it. Cinders, and chores. Women in the workforce are also much more likely to be told to do more admin, housekeeping tasks, making drinks, tea. Yes, Pickle, go and make me a cup of tea. Off you go, sweetheart. Karen says, gotta go, unfortunately, thank you, bye-bye. I hate home chores, but still doing it all. Listen, who really wants to be a fucking adult? Regardless of your gender, adulting is so fucking boring, isn't it? It's who wants to do it? And actually, the more we're living alone, the more we actually have responsibility, because sometimes that gets shared. But more and more people are starting to live alone, actually. More and more people are single. Doesn't mean they're lonely, doesn't mean they're alone, it just means that they're single, so they're likely to live alone, which means there is more responsibility for each of those people in an individual household. Of course we do the tasks, and some of us don't, that's part of it as well. Cinders, he said that to me at some point. His argument was that I'm the last in my family line, but I pointed out it's not my fault. If I'm married, I would lose my surname anyway. It's mad. It is, it's a pressure. Master Jim, school's also like that. Girls did classes in cooking and sewing. They did home economics. That's what we used to call it, didn't we? And boys did woodwork and electronics. They did. They're really good at making jacket potatoes. Caris, my mum never wanted to be a grandparent, thankfully. Kate, my father-in-law said that about not continuing the family name, which is Griffiths. It's so interesting, isn't it? If you don't carry on that name, it's all about that evolutionary pressure and that aspect. And there is a real truth in that. There is an evolutionary, like our cells, like on a cellular level, we want to procreate, we want to put these things forward. But not all of us. Again, it's one of those things. In reference, Bella says, in reference to the pink and blue chore, sorry, it's all right, I got you. Women in the workforce, here is from Cinders, thank you. So, and it's interesting, isn't it, how we are told that. If you watch films like She Said or Bombshell and the things that we speak about, where women are told to make a cup of coffee, where women are asked for sexual favours in order to find that promotion or get a part in something, it's just full of pressure. So but let's look at this kink paradox, because we're fighting for egalitarianism, we're fighting for equality, and yet I am saying, even from an equal perspective, I want to be beneath you. And that is such a paradox, isn't it? And I think that's a really important one for us to talk to. I don't know if you saw, but even at LAM the other day, why would you have seen this? But so on Instagram the other day, one of the LAM stallholders, this whole thing about the Balenciaga teddy bears and the pornography. Have you seen that? And the BDSM bears? Have you all seen that latest advert? There's a bit of photography being done, and it's basically Balenciaga sort of had these children in an advert. It's not the first time Balenciaga have sexualized children, actually. And we don't know if it's the photographer, whether they're suing the photographer or not. There's so many arguments about that. Yes, they are. No, they're not. Who really did it? And the Tampax blunder. I work on marketing lots, so I catch these things. So this is all about marketing. And basically, Balenciaga is a very expensive, high-end label. And what better way to be spoken about than to cause a scandal? So who knows who's caused it and why? But basically, these children have BDSM teddy bears. But if you then look very closely at one of the adverts, there's also a piece of writing about child pornography and laws and different things that are happening. And people have gone mad about it. And then what happened, interestingly, the other day is a woman had a go at another woman because she sells BDSM teddy bears. And she said, you are a bad human, you are sexualizing children. this woman runs a store that is purely for over 18s, that is actually meant for littles, and it's just such a different market. And again, that's a paradox, isn't it? That thing of maternal as well. Why can't we have a teddy bear with BDSM clothes on, as long as it is for adults, as long as it is for over 18s? It's not meant for a 4-year-old. I wouldn't want my 4-year-old to pick up a whip and a chain and think that that was complete normality. Imagine going into school, you know, the same as I don't want my 4-year-old to pick up a lot of other things that aren't appropriate. It's all about propriety for age, isn't it, as well? And it's been such a big thing about it. And this woman was just attacking one of the lamb storeholders. It all fired up and went against her completely. And I should go over to this storeholder and say, I fucking loved your answer. Like, such, you know, strong, powerful answer. Don't do this. Like, you're not okay. How that happened, I don't know. There would have been countless steps before the campaign was even prepared. I know, it's a bit dodgy, isn't it? The cynic in me wants all a badly chosen PR job, yes. And then Smokeless Galaxy says, quite frustrating when people don't get it with BDSM. And the reason I'm bringing this up is, again, it's about the kink paradox. It's about what we do when you think about it is, it looks like it disempowers women. I choose who I want to submit to. I choose if I'm submitting. I've brought my daughters up to be independent, pretty strong women with their goods, their bads, their pluses, their minuses, their normality, and their problems. And if they want to choose to submit, it's their fucking choice. And that's the point about this, isn't it? It's about having the choice, isn't it? Rather than saying that that's the way it is, or it's the way that it has to be. And really a lot of this is so much based on that whole principle of social conditioning. And social conditioning really holds women back. It's not good for us. It is the woman who makes that cup of coffee. And that's why we're so cruel to other women sometimes, where we bring it in and say, yes, she can make the coffee. She's the latest one. What about him? What about them? How do we also work with that and make these things happen in the right way for everybody, regardless of their gender? And this isn't an anti-man campaign. This isn't an anti-non-binary campaign. I think misogyny, misandry, hatred, trans hatred, all of those things come into everything that we do, because it's almost better to make us hate each other than it is to work with each other. And that's when we lose our strength. And I think that's something we really have to think about. Women feed babies and pick up babies. Men carry stuff and do stuff. Is that all men and women are? Is that all non-binary people are? Is that what it is? How about we can all take different roles in society and work in a very different way? Biology doesn't make women better mothers. Biology doesn't make men better accountants. Biology doesn't make non-binary people know themselves better than anyone else. Biology doesn't do this. Social conditioning does. Social conditioning states that that's the way it is. And I wrote a piece quite a few years ago about being a superwoman submissive, if you've read it or not. And when you've got that superwoman, I'm definitely that superwoman submissive. And I was writing about Betty Friedan, who talks about superwomanhood and the pressure that that brings. And it's such an enslavement in its own sense of I've got to be. So we enslave ourselves at home and at work. You want to be that person that makes the tea because you also want to get on. You want to be the person who helps everybody else that also helps you get on. And we very much go into that. We are managing multiple roles of I'll do this and I'll do that. Rowan, I'm not raising you to make slaves of women. Words from my mother on many occasions when showing brother and me basic domestic skills. I love that, Rowan. Your mother sounds fucking awesome. You know, it's not a slave, is it? When you still look at what happens, it's about, hey, how about we all pull together? I was working with a couple the other day and she said, but why should I do all the fucking wife stuff? And she's very angry. And I totally understand where she's coming from. Why is it the wife stuff? Could it be that one person has less time? Should we then be doing more because it's about time? Should it be about, like, what should it be about? I have a couple of clients who, there's a massive disparity in what they do. She doesn't work at all. He works. He also does the cooking, the washing, the cleaning, the ironing. He does everything. She doesn't do anything at all. And if we talked to her about doing something, she went, why should I? I'm not the wife. Well, she is the wife, actually. That's interesting, isn't it? That's not what we're actually talking about. What we're talking about is supporting each other, supporting other human beings in a much more healthy way. And if we have a go at ourselves because we're our own our own worst enemies, whether we're this superwoman and we really put this pressure to do multiple roles. There's also the strong black woman schema as well that comes into that. That's where you've got to be. It's how it is. And she really interestingly writes about this. She talks about the different schemas that come into different women's lives who have all sorts of different backgrounds. And the black woman schema is very much about emotional restraint, independence, caretaking at the cost of ourselves. And then the superwoman schema that comes in, I will represent strength. I will be strong. I will suppress my emotions because I don't want to come across as too feminine. I don't want to be too vulnerable. So I'm going to squish that down as well. I will succeed no matter at what cost. And I'm obligated to help and do all these things. So you want to do it all, be it all, and we're absolutely exhausted when we do it. And that's difficult, isn't it? You keep giving of yourself, and that's not healthy either. It really is okay to say, oh, I can't do this. I'm really tired. I need some help. It's Dr. Bhatia that talked about the types of women that are presented to her, the sort of women that she sees on a regular basis. And she talks about the boss lady. And the boss lady is that intelligent, witty, knows everything, in charge of everything, even regardless of their own health, happiness, and ability and capacity to manage. She talks about a savvy chick. And the savvy chick is more so, these are titles that she put in, Dr. Bhatia, and a lot of people relate to them. Equal parts ethereal artist and commander in chief. I'm going to be all these things. So Cinder says the concept of BDSM bears have been going around for years. They have. I remember a range of figurines that were related years ago in BDSM outfits, but it came down to marketing. The Balenciaga images crossed the line on so many levels. Yeah, they were with children under the age of 10. And sadly, it looks like the children images were not photoshopped into place. They definitely were not, apparently. Apparently, I say definitely, from everything I've read. I saw it and chatted about it last week with my marketing contacts, and it comes down to context. Balenciaga should have advertised the bags in so many different ways, but involving children like they did was not the answer. I think your soapbox is totally appropriate. I think it's all right to say that. So this savvy chick will often be so out of balance. You know, I'm Earth Mother, again, that pressure mixed with this boss. And actually, what's interesting is Dr. Bhatia talks about the sort of physical problems that these women end up having because of this. You've then got the Earth Mother, that totally, I'm in touch with myself and I'm a mother to all and I look after everybody. And my God, like the depression, diabetes, hypertension, blood pressure, all so many things that happen with that as well. And then you've got is it Nightingale or Angel? Can't remember, it's one of those. So that Nightingale angel who just gives all the time, never takes. Nothing is too much, nothing is too big, nothing is too small. I will keep doing it. And then I think the last one she talks about, she calls, I understand she's using some stereotypical words and words that I don't necessarily approve of. And this is her writing that I'm referencing. Gypsy Girl, that image of the Esmeralda freeness of, I'm so creative and I know everything that there is. And Jesus, there are so many problems that come with this way that we do this to ourselves. And I think it also relates to lying in women as well. People lie quite a lot. I mentioned lying just before. And actually what we know is that people lie differently at different times. And actually what's interesting is men on average tend to lie about big things like affairs. Women lie about small things because we're trying to be nice all the time. So again, we lie differently, and that's about socialization as well. The lying that we do, again, is about socialization. And that's really difficult because it looks like around these lies that women are way more likely to lie than men in this scenario. Why do we do it? Should we do? We're supposed to be caring, that nurture nature camp. Which one do we do? Is it genetic? Is it because of our socialization? Jesus, that's really interesting. And we know that concepts around gender and everything are way more fluid than people used to make them, and they are. That's exactly what it is. Why is it though in this particular situation that women tend to lie more? Because we're always trying to be nice. We've got that pressure on us to say nice things, to do nice things, to make things better. So I think when we can stop being nice, we can also start to be more honest with ourselves, and that makes such a difference. It really does make a difference. And I think feminism really has to come into BDSM and egalitarianism. I think the It's just about equality. I'm a really big believer, if you're going to negotiate to be a submissive woman, you have to start off equally to then negotiate that down. I think it's really dangerous to come in with a predisposition of power straight away. I think it's really important to be able to listen. And isn't feminism about choice? Isn't it about, so I can choose what I want to do? So why can't I choose to put myself here if the man's here? It doesn't mean that I really think that all men are better than me in any way, shape or form, because I don't. Do you? Like, is your Dom better than you in every single way, shape or form always? Is that why you do that? I think it's, we love that person, or we like that person and we choose to do it, or we like what that person is offering us and we choose to do it. And there's actually a lot more feminism or egalitarianism in that than there is in anything else. It's just about allowing different people their own way at different times, isn't it? I don't know what you'll think about that. I feel quite strongly about it because I think it's really, really complex and it really divides human beings. Like the teddy bears, like everything, we shouldn't be showing this, it's kinky, it's not nice, it's not good. There is a real connection around feminism, independence, strength, and all these things, and the kink paradox that we have and the impact that we have. And I think it really matters because as we look at BDSM becoming a lot more mainstream, as we get a lot of visibility, blindly, it makes a difference. John, in sport, if you cheat, you lose. It always surprises me. In life, if you lie, you don't automatically lose. Do you know what? There's a lot of research into people who are difficult to work with, and often they are actually put up, not down. So they're often promoted to get rid, to move over as quickly as possible. So sometimes those people in power actually are in power because they're not very easy to work with, or they lie and they're not very nice. It's easier to move them on and move them out or move them sideways than it is to stop them from working. There's a lot of research around that, a lot. Anyone got any questions about anything we've spoken about tonight, or want to add anything in any way, shape or form? Because I've gone a little bit everywhere, but it's quite a big topic to cover, really. It's quite a difficult topic to cover. Anyone got any questions or anything they want to say to add to this or ask before we disappear? And if not, I will see you all in 2 weeks and we will cover Christmas, Hanukkah, Diwali, all holidays. We will just look at holidays. Cinders, today's session has been really interesting, Debs. Thanks as always. Oh, thank you very much. That's very kind of you. It's quite a difficult one, isn't it? Because I think a lot of people will see me as very opinionated or whatever. They'd be right. Fucking opinionated. Oyster says, thank you, that's really kind of you. People saying, thank you, great workshop. Thank you very much. So, and then, and Bella and Clyde, fucking useless, I apologise. Rowan, thank you, Deb. Thank you, Smokeless. Pleasure listening. Thanks for your time. It is, but I'm opinionated too, so yeah. And Jazz says that was really interesting and useful. Thank you, interesting as always. Thank you very much. I'm really aware I owe you a certificate. So in 2 weeks' time, what we're going to look at, and then have a bit of a break over Christmas, is how to survive holidays, how to survive toxicity. Where does toxicity come from? What's the difference between toxicity and abuse? We're going to have a look at that as well. And some tips and ways to help really look at Christmas. Oh, Jesus. May I ask, which book is your best informative about social psychology? I'm not so much a social psychologist as psychology. I think the best, I don't have a best book on social psychology. I'm really sorry, I don't. Sorry. John, not much point turning up if there weren't opinions. Do you know what? I think as well as a woman, it's really important to have opinions. And what I am as a woman as well is really interested in you disagreeing with them so we can talk and debate. Rather than just telling me I'm wrong or me telling you you're wrong. That's the point, isn't it? It's a start. We need to start somewhere. We need to make choices. What's your favourite on general psychology? Favourite? I like reading anything by, I like reading about trauma. I like reading Daniel Siegel. I like reading Bessel van der Kolk. I like reading anything about neuroscience. Again, so that will take me back more to Daniel Siegel. I like reading on relationships around the Gottmans. I really like that, although I don't agree with all of their opinions around, they're not completely for polyamory and they're not very good on porn. I love the Gottmans. I love TA Today, Transaction Analysis Today. I think that has a lot of really good techniques and things to use. There's a really good book on depression by a friend of mine. There's lots. Did I get it right? No, not seagull. It's Seigel, I think. I might have some in my collection. Most of mine are based on trauma and healing authors that I recommend, very similar to me. Gable Marty. Did you see the other day that Gable Marty and who else was it? They did a live Instagram talk together. So good. So good. It was really good to watch. So those things are really worth watching as well. I actually do have anything by Vans Cook is good. I think you're right. I think it's really good. I do have a thing on FetLife that says these are all the kinky films I think people should watch. And I did say I would start a book list as well. Maybe a bibliography writing would be interesting. Yes, of every book, but not just from me. I think for people to recommend about kink, about poly, about all of those things. He's doing a new book tour, so he's on many podcasts again. Yeah, he is. He just wants to promote, which I get. I have a resource library I can DM you on Fet. Nice. We've spoken about that before, haven't we, Cosmopolite? That's maybe something we should get together and do. We have spoken about that, so maybe we should. Oh, it's an old writing, the one on the films. I gave up trying to who's not trying to keep on top of it, because there are just thousands of films and books that people have written about. So yes, we should do that, shouldn't we? I'll maybe get in contact to sort that out, and you can with me, Cosmopolite, we'll do that. Anyway, so we are doing I mean, those are my books. I don't know if you can see, but those are just part of my books over there. There are so many there. One of my favourite books, I can't even remember the name of actually. Jesus Christ. I'm a bit of a DBT fan as well. So like I love anything by Marsha Lynham or Basic DBT Skills. The Basic DBT Skills books I think are some of the best if you want really helpful stuff for people to learn about. I really do think they're some of the best. There's a book, and I can't remember the name of it. I will try and remember. And I'll try and find it. That was one of the best books about transgenerational scripting, showing things in practice and how it worked. I remember from past live streams, huge collection. Yeah. Definitely have. Cecile, you're most welcome. Feel free to drop me a message. That's very kind of you to say. Okay. Thank you very much. See you all in a couple of weeks if you want to come on. Is it under your FetLife writings? Yeah, good luck. There's about 650 now. I did say one day I will put them in some kind of list. I don't have the time. If I write, I just don't have the time. But yes, it is. It's all about fetish films and everything else as well. So I will see you all in a couple of weeks, and we'll talk about holidays, how to make them work. Time for a wank away. I'll see you all later. Thank you. Bye-bye. bye.